today's session of Ignite, and today's topic is make and receive offers. So we're going to be going over some fun content, some very relevant content, especially once you have some clients, etc., that are under contract or looking. What are the steps we're going to take now to not only make offers or receive offers, to make sure we're doing them well, and making our folks not only competitive, but structuring clean offers that lead to a deal actually coming together rather than kind of unraveling or falling apart. So before we dive in, anybody have any feedback for me on the daily 10-4? And I'll share, I know Christine might be here this morning, it's still pretty early, but she sent me an email yesterday. A little bit of a success story, just reaching out to folks on a consistent basis. I mean, she's uncovering all kinds of people that are looking to buy or sell in the future. So any other good stories like that with the daily 10-4?
I think getting out there and talking to people, getting those new people in my list. I've gotten to some folks that are interested in buying, but I've also been finding people that are just interested in the real estate industry itself, and
Right.
have a different turn that I didn't expect.
Absolutely, kind of a 2-for-1 special there.
So I'm planning on to actually.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, both of you guys this week I met with guys that have interest in real estate, so huge opportunity. All right, so let's dive into, let's go to page 9. Get your head in the game, the offer. So the offer, the process of moving from a buyer or seller agreement to the actual sales contract. Arriving at the offer stage is an exciting and rewarding time for you and your client, but I tell you, the offer phase can also be a little bit intimidating if you're not quite well-versed or super experienced yet, right? Because a lot of times you're going to be asking a bunch of questions. They're kind of reliant upon you to give some advice, some suggestions to structure it in a way that's in their best interest, etc. So having some understanding and some knowledge and some experience and some things to fall back on regarding the offer process can be super helpful. If you represent the buyer, your searching has paid off and your client has finally found their new home. If you represent the seller, you've diligently marketed and prepared their property for sale and have received an offer from a prospective buyer. This is the point where, for the first time, the buyer and the seller are coming together, or at least starting to have some conversations. It's a major financial decision, can be a highly emotional experience for the both of them. Have either of you guys had to deal with people getting somewhat emotional during a real estate transaction?
Yeah.
In a good way or a bad way?
Good way. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
A good way? So
yeah,
tell me
they were
about that.
definitely nervous about it. I could tell they were really.
First-time home buyers?
No.
Okay.
No, they owned a house out in Vegas, but first time buying here in Rochester.
Okay.
But they were renting in the meantime a townhome, spending a whole bunch of money in rent. That you and I both know just still is nowhere. So yeah, and then so they were really excited when we finally got this deal through and done. So, and then I could see that kind of just that, I don't know how to put it, just that I put them completely at ease and they were like, yeah.
Still did calm down.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. So.
Nick, any stories, good or bad, emotional wise? Here's what I'll tell you. I've done enough transactions where I've seen things get pretty heated sometimes and emotional in a way that's maybe not so good. I was just talking to Carly 1 or 2 nights ago, and we had, she put an offer in with the buyer that won on multiples. The appraisal came back $15,000 less than the contract sale price, and we found a pretty huge discrepancy in the total finished square footage that the agent had listed on MLS versus what it actually has. And so our client was like, that's nuts. First off, I'm PO'd that they listed incorrect total finished square footage. That's not cool. And so now the sellers try to come back and say, well, we were in multiples, we're only going to take the original price. We said, absolutely not. Well, then they realized quickly that it's never going to appraise for that because they had incorrect data to begin with. So they said, okay, well, we'll meet you in the middle. And we said, absolutely not. They said, okay, fine, we'll take list price. And by that time, our buyer was so mad and just peeved that they had done that. He's like, you know what, I don't even want anything to do with this property anymore. Let's just cancel and move on. So sometimes people can, they get a little bit fired up. And he was, kind of some legitimate things to be fired up about there too. But I've certainly worked with some investors who get heated sometimes. And, yeah, it's kind of crazy. So helping people manage those emotions, keeping them in check through setting expectations, and always one of the tricks that I've learned is when you have to kind of deliver bad news or news that's going to disappoint people, wargaming ahead of time what you're going to say after that to kind of pick them up and encourage them to get back out there, right? Because right now in this market, this year, we're going to have to call clients plenty of times to tell them, hey, I'm sorry, we didn't win out on this multiple offer situation. So the next question is, what are you following that up with? Hey, I've got some, this is exactly what I said, some bummer news, we didn't get it, but that's all right. That means this was the home, meant for you. There's a better one out there. We just have to get back out there and find it. Here are some more properties. And when you say that this means that just means there's a better home out there. We just have to get back out there and find it. What I'm doing is I'm encouraging them to keep going instead of throwing in the white flag. Because when people lose out 2 or 3 times, they start questioning everything and thinking to themselves, maybe let's just wait, right? Which is fine if that's what they want to do. But I need to help them understand there are some cons to doing that as well, meaning higher prices and potentially higher interest rates. So hey guys, bummer news, we didn't get this one. That's okay. That just means there's a better house out there for you. Let's get back after it and find it. Can you go out again this weekend? Or here's some more properties. Which ones do you want to see? And keep them on the train. Okay. As with every phase in the progression of a sale, you need to work quickly and carefully during the offer process. And this session will prepare you to do just that. We always have that saying in our industry, the time is of the essence, but really that doesn't mean anything because there's no definitive definition of that. Time is of the essence. Great. Does that mean I get it to you within an hour or by the end of the day, right? But what I've learned is a sense of urgency in helping move these contracts forward is better for everyone, right? So let's flip the page. Page 11, make it happen, the offer process. When a buyer has found a home they want to purchase and the seller is looking forward to concluding the sale of their property, the fun and magic begins. Whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, this is another opportunity for you to shine as a real estate professional. The overall offer process with both parties is diagrammed on page 11 for you, right? Buyer makes an offer, seller responds, they either counter, accept, or decline. If they counter, we enter into negotiations. If they accept, hey, let's begin the contract close process. If they reject, the buyer can either contact the listing agent to learn more. Okay, here's what I've learned about that. And this is this is a diagram you should probably have in your buyer consultation, right? Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, just so you know, when we make offers on properties, there's really one of the 3 things that the seller is going to be able to do, right? They're either going to counter you, which is the most likely course of action. They're probably going to counter you in some sort. And I'll actually probably be able to predict the counter to a T almost sometimes. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I can almost guarantee if you go in at this price, you're probably going to counter back at this, just so you know. And that way, when they do that, they're like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. They might accept the offer if it's a great one, or they might reject it outright. And if they reject it, no big deal. Does that mean that we're necessarily done with that house?
No.
No, what can we do?
Resubmit.
We can absolutely. Say, okay, let's up our price, let's resubmit, see what happens. Or maybe we wait a little bit and come back to it if it's still available, right? So there's a couple of things you can do there.
I got a question. Let's say that obviously now we're seeing a lot of multiple offers. So let's say, some sellers are getting 4 or 5 offers in. Yep. And they don't respond. Then a day, 2 days go by. These 5 people are just waiting. Like, haven't heard from the agent, haven't heard from the sellers or anything. And come to find out that the sellers are just holding out, to kind of leverage those offers to solicit more offers. Right? Can any one of those first initial 5 offers, can they just say, our offer is now rescinded?
Withdrawn. Absolutely. And
at any time, really?
At any time, it can be done with an email. Because nothing has been agreed to.
Okay.
Right? There's no formal, fully executed contract. So a buyer can withdraw a contract at any time they choose if it hasn't been accepted yet. Once it's been accepted, well, at that point in time, if they want to, they would have to cancel the deal, meaning both parties have to sign off on it. There's still great legitimate reasons to do that or contingencies in place for that. Yeah. But there's a big difference between being able to just withdraw and move on or having to formally cancel.
Do you put limits on the offer? Would that help?
So let's talk about that. Right now, the sellers have the power, right? Right now, if I'm a listing agent, we're day 1 on the market and get an offer, I'm not necessarily super thrilled about it. My sellers might counsel me or I might counsel them and say, hey, let's wait until we have some open house activity this weekend before we formally accept anything. Now, if you're a good agent, you're gonna communicate to the buyer's agent and say, hey, we got the offer, we've received it, we appreciate it, just to let you know, we're gonna wait for an open house. And then shortly after that, we'll be making a decision, right? It's the other agent's lack of communication that's sometimes frustrating. And unfortunately, they've got the power in that scenario because the only thing your buyers can do is number one, try to enforce an arbitrary deadline, or two, just withdraw their offer. And here's what's gonna happen. Buyers will say, we want a response by noon on this day. Well, if that deadline comes and goes, and the buyers aren't really serious about withdrawing their offer, and they still want to stay in the game, well, now they've really tipped their hand, because now the sellers know you want it so badly that you set a deadline, now the deadline's passed, and you're still interested in the property. Now I've really got you on the hook.
Yeah.
Right? Or it backfires because the sellers call their bluff and say, all right, thanks, but no thanks, we're gonna keep waiting. And now the buyers have, do we withdraw or not now at this point? So the best thing you can do is, I would say when you make that offer, you have an initial conversation, or if the listing agent tells you you're in multiples, is ask them how many offers are on the table. Are you expecting any more? And then when do you anticipate getting back to us? Have you set a deadline for best and highest? When can we expect to receive an answer from you or your sellers? And do that when in that first opportunity you have to converse with them. Otherwise, they're just never going to get back to you. Right? And you can come back and say all day long, time is of the essence, time is of the essence. But if their sellers are instructing them to hold out, well, they have to do what their sellers are instructing them to do. It's not illegal. Good question. Any other questions or thoughts on that? So let's talk about your specific example, Sean. What's going on right now?
So it's actually Leanne and Greg. They're trying to buy a property up in our neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, I think you were just telling me about this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. See, yeah, so.
So now you're hemming and hawing and kind of getting on the fence about it.
But the deadline is 8 a.m. this morning.
Oh, really? For what?
For Leanne and Greg's
For their offer?
Yep. She verbally told him, not last night, the night before, that you didn't get back to us by 8 a.m. Friday. Our offers are sending. And
sometimes that's what it takes to get the seller to get off the pot.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
And he's waiting just because, number one, he doesn't know any better. He just has no idea.
Yeah. This is for sale by owner. Yeah.
Exactly.
He doesn't have any representation.
And and then number two is he's obviously trying to milk it, trying to get solicit more offers and get as much as he can for it, even though there hasn't yet been an offer as good as Leanne and Greg's. Right. At this point.
At that point, they just have to decide, is this somebody we want to do business with? Which is, it's tricky, but it is what it is. Page 12, representing the buyer. Once your buyer finds a property they want to purchase, there are 3 actions you need to take. Prepare to write the offer, and present the offer to the listing agent. So when we talk about preparing to write the offer, like what does that mean? Where do you guys go to start writing up your offers and all that fun stuff?
Here, the office.
Yep.
Or at home, you can get the forms off.
Instanet, right?
Yep.
Instanet is a good place to go to pull those forms directly. You can enter the MLS number, click a button, and it's going to pre-populate a ton of information about the property, right? And it's just kind of plug and play from there. You can save it as a PDF, throw it in .loop, and get some electronic signatures pretty easily. Or if you're like me, the first time we do a purchase agreement with buyers, we typically like to do it in person. So you can talk through it, answer any questions. And then if for some reason it doesn't work out on that property, well, now moving forward, we're just going to do them all electronically because we've explained the process to you. Now we just need to know your terms: price, earnest money, closing date, closing costs, and then we can just put it in there for you and just click the sign. So prepare to write the offer. Before you write an offer, be sure you are fully prepared so you can work quickly and efficiently when you actually begin writing it. Use a checklist on the following page. Which of the steps can be completed before the offer itself? Well, all of them, okay? So let's look at this checklist for a minute. Here's a good quote from Chris Heller. Whether you are working with the buyer or the seller, set the expectations conservatively. That way you reduce the chance of disappointment. That's just a fancier way of saying under promise and over deliver, right? Checklist for preparing an offer. Obtain the buyer's pre-approval letter. That's a no-brainer. Maybe you can start a conversation with their lender.
That should be done before. You can write the
Absolutely.
before you can find a house, probably, right?
Absolutely,
Because
yeah.
most lenders can do that now.
They can, because you're gonna have a conversation as to the price, and you're gonna have a conversation as to, hey, what are we gonna be asking for in closing costs? You want that information ahead of time. Otherwise, you're gonna sit down at the time to write the offer, and you're not gonna know how much you should be asking for in closing costs, right? Or I'll say, here's the deal, I reached out to your lender, I haven't heard back yet, we'll sign this, and then as soon as they let me know what amount we should ask for, I'll put it in for you, let you know, and we'll send off the offer. Produce a comparative market analysis, okay? Now, you don't necessarily have to do this. Some buyers will ask for it. Don't think of it as a formal CMA. What we'll do is we'll just pull comps, we'll do a quick one, or throw it up on the computer just to let you know, hey, this is kind of what things are going for in that neighborhood, etc. And then just make sure they're not grossly overpaying for the property, or to help them get an idea of what they should be offering. Ensure the property is still available. I mean, you should do that before you even go on the showing, hopefully. Save yourself some time, right? When speaking with the listing agent, build rapport and gather as much information about the seller and the property as you can. In no time is this become more relevant than right now. Building rapport with that other agent is absolutely critical and crucial, especially if you're entering into a multiple offer situation, right? Trying to let them know that, number one, you're a good communicator, that you're serious, you're professional, you've got great buyers, they can count on you for a reliable and smooth transaction is going to help you, because if I have two offers, they're relatively equal, and Sean, you've been very communicative with me and very responsive, and I have just a good vibe from you, versus somebody else who they threw me an offer that came in disorganized, the pages were out of order, you know, they communicate with 1 or 2 word emails sporadically. Well, I'm going to think to myself, if I want a smooth transaction, I'm going to work with this dude, because I have a much better feeling about us moving from start to finish on this transaction, right? Let's talk about, find out as much about the seller. Your husband, yeah. I don't even know why I have all these yawns. It's not, I haven't even had a chance to party on St. Patrick's Day yet. So finding out more about, I bet you're St. Patrick's kind of day kind of guy, aren't
I
you?
don't do something.
Not really?
Not
anymore?
Not at all, actually.
That's the incident.
Yeah, that's just the incident of 95. So a lot of times when you call that listing agent, I love listing agents because they'll often tell me way more than they should, right? And all I did is ask one question. And usually I surrounded, usually my question is disguised. It's actually a legitimate question, but it leads to a lot more information. I'll say, what kind of closing date are they looking for? And I'm just looking for, hey, what sort of timeline? But a lot of times you get sellers that just say, oh, well, you know, they're building new construction, so we really need a close date that's blah, 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 blah. Or, hey, they already have another home under contract. So I'm like, oh, really? That's very interesting news, right? If we're not multiple offers, I mean, we're going to go to town now because I know you people need to sell, right? So sometimes just ask a couple of questions. Hey, can you tell me a little bit about the sellers, the home? Is there anything else about the home I should know that I don't know? Are they looking for anything in particular regarding closing date? Kind of what's their situation? And if you're like me, you'll answer those questions by saying, what are you guys looking for in a close date? Well, send us what works for you, and we'll see how it works on our end, right? Or we'll have that discussion, right? What's their situation? Oh, the home just no longer suits their needs. They're looking to move, right? Very non-answers to those questions because I don't want to divulge more information than I should. But a lot of people will more often than they should. Ask questions of the listing agent to discover what's important to the seller. See if you can find out their time frame, motivation for moving. This allows you to customize the buyer's offer. Inquire about activity on the property. I'm not too concerned about showings as much as I'm concerned about, hey, do you have any offers? Are you expected to receive? Because here's what listing agents are famous for doing. Hey, any offers yet? Well, we've had a lot of activity and a lot of people asking questions. Great, so let me ask you my question again. Do you have any offers yet? Well, let me tell you, I've had a few agents say that, they've got clients that are interested. Okay, that's great. I'm sure everybody in the city wants to buy the property. Do you have any offers yet? Find out where they stand. You know what I mean? I don't want to play games. Obtain a seller's disclosure statement. Hopefully you've already got one. If not, ask for one right then and there. Are there any other offers? That's the other question you want to ask. Page 14, number 2, write the offer. Keep these guidelines in mind and use the checklist on the previous page as you write the offer. All right. This is like some really good where the rubber meets the road type of content when you're meeting with clients to know this stuff. Ensure you have a question.
So question on the whole, like, okay, so you call up an agent and they say, well, we've already got some offers on. There's still a sense of, I mean, there's still a point to put in an offer.
Absolutely.
And even if the agent says, well, we've got a pretty strong offer, I mean, I had somebody.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
But here's the deal.
I mean, I kind of was scared to then put in an offer. It was for my own house.
Right.
I just didn't want to waste the time at that point for myself. But
Yeah. And
we weren't in love with the house.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that's helpful news. If we go through a home and the buyers kind of like it, like, oh yeah, we could probably make it happen. We'll think about making an offer, and then they realize there's 4 on it. They're like, oh, well, let's just keep looking. It's not worth our time. And that's cool. If that's what they want to do, cool. I'm not gonna have you write one on it, because if they're just okay with the home, that means they're probably not gonna write a competitive offer, right? Which means they're probably not gonna have a chance compared to the other ones who really do want that home.
Until they say they have an accepted offer, the ball game is still on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And here are a couple questions that you should ask that listing agent almost immediately. Hey, how many other offers do you have on the property? They'll say, we have 3 other offers. Okay, great. Do you represent any of them? Yes, as a matter of fact, I do represent one of them. Okay, great. Do you have a variable rate comp with the seller? You guys know what that is?
Yeah.
What is that?
So if he's representing both sides, then obviously with this, if he's representing a seller, most people usually do it for less than the 6%.
They might
save them some money at the end.
They might. So a lot of times I shouldn't say a lot of times, sometimes when people take a listing and they take it at 6%, they might tell the sellers, or the sellers might request what's called a variable rate compensation, which means, hey, if you represent us as the sellers and you also find and represent the buyers, that you'll adjust that 6% down to 5% since you're on both sides of the deal. Right? It's a variable rate comp. But here's an interesting tidbit about that. Number one, if you ask the listing agent if they represent another offer, they have to disclose to you whether or not they do. And they have to disclose to you whether or not they have a variable rate comp. What they don't have to disclose is the amount of the variable rate comp, right? But why is that important to you and your buyers, though?
Because your buyers would have to come up with a pretty strong offer to counteract, or yeah.
Now your buyers know that there's some sort of discount involved with one of the offers, right? So what they might choose to do is try to factor in if they anticipate that the listing agent's offer is going to save them an additional %. Or half a percent.
They need to be there or more.
They might factor that into their offer as well, and that's why it has to be disclosed. So a couple of follow-up questions. It's not to be weird or goofy to be like, oh, well, you have one of the offers, something underhanded is going on here. That's not the reason behind it. It's to know and understand if there's a variable rate comp involved, which they have to disclose that to you. Does it also ask you when you list a property if it's a variable rate comp?
Yeah.
It does. But let me ask you this. Could you list a property, not have it be a variable rate, but then further on down the road, the listing agent and the sellers have a conversation and they agree to it? So that might not be reflected on MLS, right?
Yeah.
So you should still ask. Even if MLS says no variable rate comp, still ask them because things may have changed. That way you know.
Let me ask you this then. Have you ever had, so if you're asking a listing agent, are there any other offers?
Mm-hmm.
And they say yes.
I'll say how many?
Yeah, but can they? I mean, obviously anybody can say anything. So
Right.
how do you know that there is actually another offer? If
Well,
there is,
Sean,
ask
you-
for proof?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, you've hit the nail on the head. This is the trouble or the difficult aspect of multiple offers is you happen to take people at their word. There's just so much stuff that you're just never going to be able to verify, even when you lose, right? We've all had that feeling that, hey, something weird went down. Like we just had one recently where Carly went into multiple offers, hadn't heard anything for a couple of days, and found out her clients didn't get it because she got an alert via showing time that the home was no longer available. So she had to try. She's been reaching out to the agent over and over again. She finally emailed them and said, "Hey, I'm assuming this means we didn't get the home. Like seriously, that's how we have to find out. That's why I have to go on to notify my clients."
Find it on Facebook.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, we don't know if that means we got it or we didn't get it. I'm guessing that means we didn't get it. But it's like, really, let's be professional about it.
Right.
It just feels icky, and then we have to give bad news to our clients, and they want questions answered. And unfortunately, sometimes there's no answers, or the answers we give them aren't satisfactory, right? So
that just goes to show how important the building that rapport is.
absolutely, and
You know,
the wishy-washy answer to that question, John, is that as realtors, we have a code of ethics.
Yeah.
And that we're all supposed to abide by that code. So at the end of the day, we should take comfort in knowing that our fellow realtors are doing what's ethically right. But you and I both know we're all human, and sometimes that doesn't happen, right? So just try to be as transparent and stay in communication with them as much as possible. So if we don't win an offer, we'll almost always ask, great, why is it that the sellers didn't choose ours, or what was it about the other offer that made it more attractive, right? So I'm looking for one or two tidbits I can go back to my clients with and explain to them legitimate reasons why they didn't get it, right? Like, the other offer was all cash. Great, I'll share that with my clients. Hey, they got beat out on how much it netted the sellers. Okay, I'll share. Hey, the other one had a way more attractive close date, or the earnest money was way more. If there are good, tangible, legitimate reasons I can share with my buyers, so you're gonna be able to, it's gonna be an easier pill to swallow versus just, hey guys, you didn't get it and I don't know why. Right? Because guess what? Yeah, then they're kind of mad at you. And here's what else happens sometimes. Really goofy stuff will happen. Let's say it was multiple offers. The home was listed at $250. They offered $260. They didn't get it. And little do we know, we don't know this, but the winning bid offered $265, right? But let's say that deal moves forward. They have an appraisal. The appraisal comes back at $255. So 2 months later, my buyers see online that the home sold for $255. What do you think their immediate reaction is?
How is that?
How in the world does that happen? We offered $260 and it sold for $255. How do we get beat out by that? That's just immediately what they think. What they don't know, what we don't know, is the backstory. Hey, there was an appraisal issue, so it had to get changed back to that. That's why that happened. Exactly. It wasn't an arbitrary. It was nothing nefarious happened. Nobody was trying to pull one override. Nobody lied. Nobody did anything devious to help you, to make sure you didn't get it. It was the fact that you did legitimately get beat. There was an appraisal issue that bumped it down to $255, which happens to be less than what you originally offered. That is what it is, right? Sometimes, Bold has a lot of sayings about, coming from curiosity and not assuming and stuff like that. And I've learned that to be the case. Like, don't assume. That goes with making offers too. You're gonna don't assume that they're gonna tell you no. Throw it their way, see what happens, start a conversation, right? Same with, when you go on your listing or buyer appointments, don't assume that people are there to shut you down and say no. If anything, you should assume that they want to work with you, right? It all depends upon your mindset and how you enter that appointment. Same thing applies to negotiations and offers. Great questions, any more? Okay. So on page 14, write the offer. Ensure your buyer knows that all the checks, etc., earnest money are written at the same time the offer is written. They are deposited upon acceptance. This will vary by area. Check with your, okay, don't worry about that. Here's what I'll say. When you're working with younger people, like there's been a couple of times where I didn't set the proper expectation and it came time to write an earnest money check. And they're like, I don't have checks. Who has checks these days? And I'm like, I have failed you, right? So there's ways you can obviously solve that or work around it. There's also something called trust funds right now that you can utilize. Which you can wire earnest money. Yes, sir.
In regards to earnest money, a lot of times I haven't seen it come out of my bank account.
In a timely manner, or
in a timely manner, or
okay.
by the time we get in. So does it have to be deposited, or
yeah, it's a big deal.
Okay.
Because I've dealt with that before.
I've been in the situation where I haven't seen it come out, and then.
Yeah. Let me explain to you what happens, because I've had to deal with it. So it was a couple of years ago. We had a buyer. We sent over an earnest money check to the other real estate company, and we don't have visibility on that as agents. I don't know if it's getting cashed or not. The buyer didn't notice it not being cashed. So what happened was we got toward closing and the lender is running everything through underwriting. And they're like, hey, we don't have any proof that this earnest money was cashed. You know, where's this magical check? This is supposed to be $1,000 toward the property already. We've got no record of it. So then we had to contact the listing brokerage and said, hey, do you guys have the check? Or hey, we need a confirmation or some sort of document from you that shows it was deposited, right? Because earnest money checks get misplaced sometimes. Hopefully not by you. But they lost the earnest money check. They legitimately lost it. So what we did is we just amended the purchase agreement and we took the earnest money out of the agreement and they just brought all the money to closing instead, right? So it is a big deal. You want to watch for that. And I tell people in the consultation, earnest money check is written at the time of the offer. It gets cashed shortly thereafter. So make sure you have the funds ready and in that account at the time of. Because you can't plan to have your earnest money a week after you write your offer in the bank account. It has to be there at the time of because they're going to cash that check, right? And then help them understand to have that check with them. Now, sometimes, especially right now, things move fast, right? Or people forget their checkbooks, right? So, hey, here's the deal. We can still write up the offer. We don't need to stall the process. We can still write up the offer. We can submit it and just let the other agent know that, hey, if and when this offer is accepted, they're going to just go ahead and run or drop off the check directly to your office. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there are some workarounds. I wouldn't let that hold you up from at least submitting an offer and getting the conversation moving. Otherwise, I'll tell them, hey, let's do it. Let's write it up. I'll submit the offer, but tomorrow morning on your way to work, make sure you drop the check off at the office or drop it in our Dropbox. That way we will not have it. Right? Okay, in my transactions, obtain the appropriate offer to purchase forms, okay, the purchase agreement, etc. Bring your laptop or tablet with you if you want to. The only time I would have my laptop or computer hooked up to the TV is to show them some comps to kind of help them determine price. Other than that, I'm doing old school hard copy paperwork the first time we do an offer. After that, it's all digital, right? Because I want people to have a physical copy, be able to review it, to ask questions if they have them, things like that. When your buyer makes an offer, they're essentially selling themselves. I mean, right now, that's a huge, huge aspect of transactions. Buyers are selling themselves in addition to their offer. A cover letter makes your client's offer stand out and serves the following purposes. It summarizes the offer, include a brief list with bullet points that capture the key items of the offer checklist. I do this in an email all the time. I'll say, hey, so-and-so, please see the attached offer and confirm receipt of it. And then I'll say, here are the main, here are the terms: the price, closing costs, close date, earnest money, contingent upon inspection. Like those are the main things, right? What else is there to discuss? That's really all we need to know. We are in the habit of writing very, very clean offers. I don't nitpick and throw a bunch of onesies and twosies in there because I want the deal to be done, right? So I highly encourage that. That's going to make your life a little easier. The cover letter also serves as a way to humanize the offer or your clients. The sale of a home is more than just a transaction on paper to some people. It's a major life event, usually for the seller, the buyer, and their families. Describe reasons why the buyer likes the house, includes favorite features. I would say probably compliment the home, write a short profile of the buyers. These activities help foster personal connection between the seller and the buyer and increase the chance that your buyer's offer will be the one that's accepted. I would also say include a picture. You know, if it's a nice, sweet young couple or young family or whatnot, or even just a single person and their dog, like find a nice picture, send it along with the letter because, you know, now instead of just a number in the minds of the sellers, they're actually picturing a person. And family. Absolutely, absolutely. And people will say, like, we've got people write letters, oh my gosh, we've been renting in this neighborhood for so long, we just love the area, your home became available, it's gorgeous, we'll take such great care of it, we can tell that you have, we can't wait to start and raise a family. I mean, it's like a lifetime show on a letter. It's how do you say no to these people, right? Or hey, I'm a veteran, I just retired from the military, done a couple of tours overseas, would love the chance to have your property, it's fantastic. So I work with a lot of vets. And a lot of times, people come back and say, hey, you guys weren't even the highest offer, but because they were a veteran, we really wanted to work with them. What were you saying?
When you write that, so you write an email that essentially states, you know, these are the points that you want to hit, you know, inspection, so on and so forth. Do you attach a letter Do you attach the letter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Not inside your email. It's
Yeah,
attached.
their letter is an attachment. The offer's attached and so is the letter. And I'll save it as a PDF, just so it's not some weird editable document. So it's an actual, like, legitimate document. You can't really.
That's probably an expectation you should set at fire consultation too.
Right.
Get them in the mindset and thinking about that, so then when it comes to time to write an offer on a really attractive house that other people are also interested in, like, then they don't go like, well, why would we have to do that?
Right.
You know, like, I actually had that happen.
Did you? Well, here's the other thing. Does it only have to be used during multiple offers?
No, never.
Right.
No,
You can use it all the time.
Right.
Right. It could just be a standard.
And in this
procedure.
case, in my case, it wasn't in multiple offers. It's just that
Really?
my buyers were just lazy.
Right.
They're just, and I did a poor job managing their expectations at the front end,
Okay.
you know, to explain to them like, hey, you know, at the end of the day, I make this transaction happen, but, you know, I'm no God. I cannot make those sellers just bow down to you and just give you what you want.
Right.
You know, and yet they're, you know,
They're
almost yelling at me
give
like,
and
come on, Sean, get this done for us. Like, come on, guys, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
You know,
I
You still
can't
gotta
get
be
you a
reasonable.
$500,000 house for $300,000.
Right,
I'm not
exactly.
Because if I could do that, I'd be buying it myself.
Right.
Well, that's, you raise a good point, and there's no reason why during that consultation you can get started on a letter right then and there.
Or take a picture of them.
Right. Seriously.
So you have it, ready to go.
Yeah, and then take a picture of them, and then take a picture with them, so you can use it in your marketing material too, right? Or what we'll do is we'll say, hey, here are a couple of letters from previous clients to give you an idea. You can use some of these as a good way to get your mind going about how you might want to write your own letter or something like that. Or here's a template or something. Anything that makes it that much easier for them. Or heck, if we have to write it for you, we will. If we think it's going to get the job done, and then we're going to send it to
I
you.
actually wrote the letter.
Did you really?
Because they didn't want to do it.
You said
They thought they didn't have to.
my buyers are so crazy. Please let them buy this property so I can be done with them.
And honestly, I was really uncomfortable doing it too.
Were you?
Yeah, because it wasn't them that read the letter.
Yeah.
It was me. I don't
Did you
want
get
it.
it?
They got it.
It was worth
Of course,
it. It's because of the letter that you wrote, John.
yeah. Actually, that was a big part of it.
See?
Yeah.
See? There you go, man. Sometimes you gotta roll up your sleeves and make it happen. Okay. Create a buying loop. Yep, we kind of recommended a dot loop and how the transaction progresses after that. Use the email messaging feature. What I'll do is, especially if I'm doing electronic signatures, because a lot of times what will happen is, we put everybody's signatures and we click it and we send it. We don't even think it, right? They're getting this email like, oh, what the heck is this? Who's this from? Click the sign. What does that mean? So I'll always put a message in it to something like, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. You're going to find all the paperwork here for you to review. Click the sign. Let me know if you have any questions. Sign that sign at Zach. So they know it's coming from me. And, it's just a brief explanation. And I'm also saying, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. Let me know. Don't feel like you just have to click and sign your life away, not knowing what the heck's going on. So let's go to page 15. Checklist for writing an offer. Price and terms. Consult with your buyer to arrive at the most logical offering based on the CMA and some of the items we're going to talk about below. So, we've got some great St. Patrick's Day pictures up on the board. Let's talk a little bit about, oh no, I don't want to ruin it. Nope, it's getting ruined. Like when you guys see properties listed for sale on MLS and you're working with buyers, you kind of have a good idea sometimes based on days on market, what's currently priced, like what it should probably go for. So let's have that conversation. And we can talk in general terms. If we've got a property listed for sale, it's been on the market for a week. It's listed at $250, been on for a week, price is relatively reasonable, no other offers right now. Like what's a pretty common place to start on that property, offer-wise?
Between 240, 245.
Absolutely. 5 or 10 under.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're also asking for what?
Closing costs.
Exactly, which is an additional 3%, right? So if I've got a home that's on the market right now, $250, it's been about a week, right? We might come in at $240, asking for 3% in closing costs. But here's what I'm going to do. I don't want to set unrealistic expectations for my buyers that they're going to get it for $240. I'll say this is a great place to start. Hopefully they'll meet us in the middle. What do you think they're probably going to counter back at?
245.
They're probably going to counter back at 250 and 3%. Probably. Or they might just jump the gun and say, let's make it happen and come down to 245. Because they're going to say 250, 3%. And then what are we going to say? 245 and 3%. And then we're going to see if we can split any more hairs, if they're going to hold their ground, if we're going to hold, or if we're going to go in at 247.5 and 3%. Right? That's how it always plays out. It's pretty simple. Right?
The idea is to get the ball into their court fast.
Yeah, the idea is to throw the offer to get the conversation started. Because once this becomes competitive, what's going to happen? This goes bye-bye.
Yeah.
And this becomes the new starting point. That's now the minimum, right?
So you're no longer asking for closing costs.
Yeah, well, your absolute minimum is this in closing costs. If you want a shot at it, you're going to try to at least net them that, which means you might roll that 3% on top, right? And then anything above and beyond that is just how much do you want the property, right? So that's like if it's been on, if the property's been on for just a week or so, we're probably going to end up at, and there's no competition, we're probably going to end up around list price at 3%, maybe 5 off or so if we're lucky, right? If it's been on for like 30 days, like let's say it's been on for like a month or two and they're at 250, right? Right. I'm probably still going to come in somewhere around. We'll probably come in around 235 to 240 and 3%, just to see if they're desperate at all. But here's what's going to happen though. They're probably going to counter back at this point at what?
Probably 240 or
now they might not counter back at 250 and 3%. They're probably going to come back to me at 245 and 3%, because right now they know that if they have a good agent, their agent's been talking to them for the last couple of weeks about a price reduction. Right, so they know they should probably be closer to 245 at this point. That's why we came in at 240. So now they're going to come down initially, and now if we started here, we can come up to 240, or we can hold our ground at 240, or we can come to 245 or find some gray area in the middle. Right, and a lot of it has to do with days on the market.
Yeah, that's huge.
If it's been priced appropriately.
That actually dovetails into my question.
Sure.
It's a hard question to ask and a hard question to answer. I'm sure because it all, of course, varies on every property. But if you see properties that are just overpriced, and there's just one over in the Kutzke area, it's just nobody touched it.
It's grossly overpriced.
Yeah. And it was because everyone loves that neighborhood kind of a thing, and they thought they could get this price. And do you recommend to a buyer that you come in pretty low, or do you just?
Yeah, well, number one, it depends on how much they want it, and I know there's going to be an appraisal at some point. But if there's a property on the market at 400, and it should easily be at 350, and it's been on for 90 days, or less. I mean, it doesn't matter how long it's been on, really. If it's grossly overpriced. But I've got buyers that are interested in it, and we've done some analysis, and we know that it should be closer to 350 all day long. I'll say let's make the offer. Let's do it. Let's throw something their way. The chances that they're going to immediately reject it or say no is what? Pretty high that they'll say no, right?
Crazy sellers.
Right. The chance that they might counter back at 375 is always a possibility, right? The chance that they say, you know what, we've been on 90 days, we really need to get this sucker sold. We know we were testing the market at 400. Let's just take the 350 that we secretly would have taken anyway. Could happen, right? So don't let unrealistic sellers deter your buyers from making realistic offers. Ooh, I'm gonna say that again. I kind of like that saying. Don't let unrealistic sellers. What did I just say? Don't let, I have to go back to the recording. Don't let unrealistic sellers deter realistic buyers from making an offer.
Buyers to making realistic offers.
Yeah, don't let unrealistic sellers deter buyers from making a realistic offer. There it is for the win, right? Yeah. So if we've got unrealistic sellers at 400, but we've got buyers who are realistic and want to buy at 350, and that's what the market supports, let them throw the offer out there, right? Are you going to maybe kind of roll your eyes privately and say we might be wasting some time? Sure, you're human. That's a possibility. But there's also the possibility that these people say, hey, this is the first offer we've got. We've been on 90 days. Let's just make it happen. You know, 400 was a pipe dream. We'll happily take 350 just to get out of this sucker, right? Or it at least starts a conversation and maybe end up closer to 360 or something.
Or hopefully you build enough rapport with that other agent, find out more information to actually put some substance to why.
Right. Right. You might make the argument to the listing agent and say, hey, these are all the comps we're finding. We just want to pass them along to you. If you know of others out there that we're not seeing, please let us know. But my buyers are requesting that you please share these with your seller and let them know this is how we're coming up with the price that we are. Because sometimes I'll say, hey, if we're coming in low, I'll say our price, our offer is not a reflection of what we think of the home. It's a gorgeous property. My offer of 350 doesn't mean I think your home is a piece of crap, right? My offer of 350 does not reflect the condition of the home or what we think about the home. Our offer just reflects the market.
To avoid offending them or pissing them off.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'll phrase it nicely.
Throwing the appraiser under the bus.
Yeah, yeah, but that's how I'll phrase it. Hey, just know that our offer does not reflect what we think about the home. It's a gorgeous property. What our offer reflects is what the market is telling us that it's worth, right?
The last thing you need is to walk into a closing. Absolutely.
Seller's disclosures, yet let's review those and take a good look at them. And here's the deal, sometimes the seller's disclosures become a little bit of a hand wave. Like, here's the disclosures, go ahead and sign them. Nothing weird in there. Did you take a look at them? Oh yeah, well no, did you look at them? Did you look at them as well as the agent? Take a look at those suckers, right? Because people will sometimes, they won't fill a portion out. They'll leave something purposely vague, or they'll mention something and you're like, wait a minute, we need to ask more questions about that. That seems a little fishy, right? Like, oh, we had water in the basement one time 3 years ago. Well, tell me more about that. Was it like a swimming pool down there? Were you guys enjoying the summer in the basement? Or was it just a tiny little bit of leakage or seepage in the corner? Like, water in the basement can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people, right? And you'll find that some people, when they hear water in the basement, they're like, oh my God, get me away from this home. And some people are like, oh really? Okay, well yeah, that's, you know, every once in a while, that's kind of a normal thing, right? So have those conversations and ask some more questions about stuff like that. Age of roof, unknown. Okay, well, could you give us a guess? Like, did you guys do any work to it? Was it when you bought it? Do you have the previous disclosures? Anything at all that you could potentially give us? Conveyances. Consider what items in the home will transfer or convey to the buyer. Typically, attached fixtures stay and movable items go with the seller. In some areas, the seller's disclosure statement will specify which items conveyed. These items are often up for negotiation. So in Minnesota, our rule is kind of what?
No personal property.
Right. If it's fixed to the property, if it's a fixture, meaning it is bolted to the property, it's affixed to it, then it's going to stay behind, right? But like a couch, etc., isn't, for obvious reasons. But could the buyers request that?
Yeah, they could.
They certainly could. They certainly could. Do I recommend doing it in your initial purchase agreement? Absolutely not. Keep that stuff separate. Keep it completely separate.
Personal property down.
Right, because who wants you to keep it separate?
The lender.
The lender, the bank, all day long. They don't want to see that in there. Hey, I'm financing you to purchase a home, not a home and a TV and a car and a boat, right? You're not going to roll us into a package deal because now we don't have the true value of the home. We've got the value of the home plus all this other junk.
How does that work with furnished?
Say it again.
How does that work with the furnished?
Like it comes furnished?
Yeah.
I would probably just make another personal property addendum separate of the P that outlines everything, and even if it's for $1 or whatever, say, hey, we're conveying all this property to you guys. Boom. Make it visual that way. So let's have a conversation about
some
pictures.
VA financing though, I ran into that with my last.
Which is what?
They didn't even like that. We had like a lawnmower.
Personal property addendum?
Yeah.
Well, how'd they get a copy?
Well, see, that's the thing. I forgot to tear that thing down.
Well, now we learn, right?
Yeah,
Now we
exactly.
But let's talk about fixtures for a little bit. Have you guys ever had any confusion surrounding fixtures or any particular items in sales of properties? Nothing. Okay. I'm going to throw some out there for general discussion.
Switching of fridges.
Oh,
Dryers, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we ask, or is it displayed on MLS if the washer and dryer stay or go?
Sometimes it is, but it depends.
Yeah, well, so the question is kind of sometimes confusing because the question asks washer or dryer. Well, yeah, I have a washer and a dryer. Did I ask you if you plan to leave it behind?
Uh,
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And when a buyer reads that, oh, property has a washer and dryer, great. What does that mean it comes with it? I don't know. Does it or does it not? What I will tell you is when I represent buyers, we always write the washer and dryer into the deal, always. Matter of fact, we'll write, so I know the purchase agreement covers a bunch of fixtures and everything. I'll write in there anyway, and all appliances to include washer and dryer as seen on, and I put the data to show it, right? But what I tell buyers in the consultation is, hey, we're always asking for all the appliances and fixtures, but what I'll tell you is about 80% of the time, the washer and dryer, in my experience, gets left behind. The other 20% of the time, the sellers intend to take it with them. I tell them we'll always ask for it, but just know that some people might plan to take it with, but it's a point of negotiation, right? Because even if they have listed or they say, hey, washer and dryer not included, does that mean you can't ask for it? Absolutely not. You can still ask for it. You know what? Let's make it a negotiable item. It's completely up to them. What are some? So everybody usually has a refrigerator in their kitchen, right? Well, where else do people sometimes have refrigerators? In the garage. Where else? In the basement, at the bar, right? So your buyers and sellers, you need to be very, very clear during that purchase agreement. Does this include every single refrigerator in the home, or does it not? Does it include the big freezer that's in the garage or downstairs in the basement? You know what I mean? So have those conversations. Okay, oh, by the way, there's a microwave, but it's not built in. It sits on the countertop, just like this computer sitting on the desk. Is that a fixture? Absolutely not. What if it's built into the cabinet?
It is.
It is, right? So is the microwave coming or going? Well, that's right. Maybe it's a nasty microwave you want it to go. I don't know, right? Let's talk about the stuff outside. Let's talk about, the projector.
Projector would be a perfect example of something that stays, correct?
Well,
Negotiable.
because
The
the mount is
the
the
fixture.
fixture wall.
Oh, okay.
Same with the TV.
Right.
The TV mount.
Oh,
You know
sure.
what
I
I
suppose
mean?
it would be looked at as the same thing. I went through one that had a projector and full sound system, movie theater essentially. In the living room.
Yeah.
And essentially I was told that it should, but we'll write it in just to make sure.
Right, absolutely. That's, when in doubt, write it in. Yeah. And then, because here's the deal, I would rather have it come up right now and have us hammer it out as we're negotiating versus we do a final walkthrough and it's not there anymore. And my buyers were expecting it and the sellers.
And they think they got this great deal with this home theater system.
All of a sudden, Sean was like, Sean, the only reason we bought this home is because right? That seriously becomes a mentality.
Yeah.
So don't be that agent that's afraid to bring that stuff up because you just hope it will work itself out or that you hope things will go magical at walkthrough. Hammer out every detail you possibly can on the front end, right? So that you don't have to have any of those weird, uncomfortable conversations later on down the road, right? Because there's a lot of stuff. Like there are mirrors. Is it hung? Is it bracketed in?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's lots of forms of decor that are like that. Curtains. Let's talk about curtains and blinds. Are those staying or going? Let's clarify that.
Do you ever use pictures to illustrate?
Not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. You want to get as detailed as possible, right? Okay. Earnest money. The buyer makes a deposit to the seller to show good faith in the transaction. Earnest money is typically deposited in an escrow account that is jointly held on behalf of the buyer and the seller. Usually it's listing brokerage, in our case here in Minnesota. Determine an amount that would be acceptable to both your buyer and the seller. In many markets, 2 to 3% of the purchase price is normal. What are you finding right now in our market in terms of earnest money?
1%.
So you're doing a percentage?
Yeah. About, or anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. I think my last one was $3,000. One before that was $2,000.
Yeah.
It's nothing significant.
No, it really isn't. Like if I'm working with buyers, especially for some home buyers, and we're in the 2s or less, it's like $1,000, right? Sometimes listing agents or other entities will have a minimum threshold. They'll say, hey, we want to see a minimum of 1% or 2%, blah blah blah. As your price point gets higher, $3,000, $300,000, $400,000, it might be closer to the $3,000 to $5,000 mark. And when it becomes a multiple offer situation, obviously those amounts might get higher to show that you're wanting to be more competitive and more serious, right? But right now, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 is probably pretty good. Time for seller acceptance. Be sure to specify the time for acceptance. This is a way of saying, hey, if you guys want to include a deadline, you can. Financing terms. Make sure the terms are agreeable to your buyer and seller. So let's talk about that a little bit, because especially when I was new, little did I know that some properties wouldn't necessarily appraise for certain reasons, right? So let's talk about FHA and VA appraisers or appraisals. First off, FHA and VA versus a conventional loan, which appraisal is more stringent? FHA, VA, right? These guys are a little bit more stringent, right? Between these two, who's more stringent? VA. VA, absolutely. So we've got conventional, pretty good, very few appraisal issues. If we're going to have an appraisal issue with the conventional loan, it's usually just price, right? For whatever reason. And if they're putting a lot of money down, then you're usually going to be even safer. Now let's look at FHA and VA, right? So if we have issues here, what kind of issues are we seeing with these sorts of appraisals? Besides price issues, right?
Oh yeah, the condition of the property.
But what specifically about paint?
Lead paint or chipped.
Chipped, right? The fact that it's chipped. Well, no, it's chipped because the issue is it can be dangerous if it is lead paint, right? Because if it's chipped in it, and God forbid a child eat that, huge repercussions, right? So when we're looking at FHA properties, a big one is, besides price, is it paint or chipped or just overall condition of the home. They're just a little bit more finicky about that property. And then the VA has, a couple more things above and beyond. The VA is really crazy about the paint, and then other items
stuff like that too.
Right, the roof, all kinds of stuff. They're going to be pretty stringent about it. So what you need to know is, and oh, by the way, when we're making offers on townhomes or condos, anything that has a CIC, what implications might we have financing wise when we're doing that?
Association. Yeah. Rental.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Do all associations qualify, or are they allowed? Are buyers allowed to use FHA or VA financing to purchase those properties? No, you're almost always good conventional, right? Almost always good conventional. But sometimes they may or may not be FHA approved. And if they're FHA approved, does that automatically mean they're VA approved? No, it could be vice versa, right? So when you see that CIC in the legal description of a property, or you're doing a townhome, because sometimes townhomes are actually legally what? Condos, because they have a CIC. We need to check with the lender almost immediately to see if your buyer's financing is even appropriate for that property. Because a lot of times, when you go to list a home for sale as a listing agent, where do you pull a lot of that information from to relist it? You go to the MLS, right? You look at the last listing. And another agent might have had that listing 3 years ago. And guess what? At that time, 3 years ago, the association qualified, that marker's worthless, qualified for FHA and VA financing, right? But it's 3 years later. Little do you know, that expired. You're relisting the property that, 3 years ago it was good on FHA, it was good on VA, let's throw that on there. You didn't verify it. I call you as a buyer's agent and I say, hey, I just want to go ahead and make sure that we're good to go. I got people that are using FHA financing. You say, yeah, not a problem. All right. Well, let's pause right there. Because if I'm a good buyer's agent, what am I going to do?
You gotta ask.
I'm going to ask them, and even if they tell me it's good to go, what am I then going to do?
Call the association.
Calling the association immediately to verify that firsthand, right? But let's say I didn't do that. Let's say I was a little bit of a lazier buyer's agent. I took the agent at their word. We put together a purchase agreement. We've had a home inspection, and then we come to find out that, hey, this is not approved for FHA financing. Well, holy crap.
Buyers just spend a lot of money on
The buyers, they've got earnest money tied up in an escrow account right now. They paid for a home inspector. They've got time spent. In their minds, they've been visualizing themselves in this home. They maybe have even paid for an appraisal.
They've already sold their other house.
Potentially, right? So there's a whole host of issues that we didn't uncover because we didn't pay attention to financing and what could actually be utilized there. Yes, sir.
Is there a stipulation on townhouses, how many are rentals and how many aren't? Like 80-20?
Depends on the association, and that's what FHA looks at a lot. Okay. They try to determine how many rentals are going on, and they have a threshold that, hey, if this becomes rental central, we're not going to allow FHA financing anymore. That's where that sometimes comes into. And they also have to have a certain amount of money in the reserve account at the association to qualify, things of that nature, right? Because if the government's going to insure or back these loans, they want to make sure the associations aren't going to go under, or that the values aren't going to decline overnight. Because if you have nothing but rentals, looking at sometimes due to the value of properties overall, it can take overall values down, right? If it's just all rentals, right? So that's why they're looking at that. But just know, hey, there's a couple. So what I'll do is, if we walk through a home and I see stuff like this, what do you think I tell my buyers? Yeah, hey, FYI, there's a good chance this might get flagged on an appraisal. We can either wait till then to have the sellers solve it, or we can have the conversation with the sellers ahead of time and say, hey, we noticed around the garage we had some chip paint. The appraisal is going to be out there in about a week or so. Do you guys think you can have that, fixed or repaired before he comes out there to save us all some hassle, right? Or, hey, just want to let you know we saw this. We think it might be an issue. If it gets flagged on the appraisal, we just want to make sure you guys are cool taking care of it. Yeah, hey, let's roll the dice. Let's see if it gets flagged. If it gets flagged, we'll take care of it. No worries. Okay, cool. I'm fine with that, right? So just have those discussions up front. And then condos and townhomes, man, really pay attention to that financing. Call the lender and have them look at the address too, because they have a database they can look at to see if the associations are currently qualified for those. Did you have a question?
Yeah, okay, so it's something you mentioned before about the conventional financing.
Yep.
In the appraisal, and if there's a lot more money down or something, how does that affect the appraisal? Or
it's really weird. It's kind of a goofy thing, Sean, because it has everything to do with risk, right? Yeah, if somebody is using conventional financing, what does that usually mean about them and their financial situation?
pretty solid values.
Yeah, they're more solid than FHA typically, right?
Yeah.
And then if they're gonna do, instead of 5% down, if they do 20% or 30% down, how does the bank start to feel about that loan?
Pretty dang good.
We're feeling okay about it, right? Hey, these are solid buyers. They're putting a substantial amount of money into this property. They've got a lot of skin in the game. We view it as much less risky. Therefore, our appraisal parameters or requirements are going to be a little bit looser, right? We're not going to be as strict. Back in the day, and I don't even know if this happens anymore, but if it was a conventional loan, 20% down, they would do what's called a drive-by appraisal. They wouldn't even go in the home. I hope they were at least driving by, but the idea was they just drive by, say, yep, looks good, it's a house, it's not about to fall over. These people have enough money, we feel good about the loan, let's make it happen, right? So sometimes the requirements are looser. But here's the deal: if you're using conventional financing, you put 20% down, you probably typically buy a pretty decent home.
Yeah.
So it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit. Good question, though. Let's see. We talked about the pre-approval letter. Send that over with the offer, obviously, and then loan approval. Allow your buyer ample time to finalize their financing. Right. So if who arbitrarily puts in the close date initially? The buyer does. Yeah, in the purchase agreement. Unless we've had a discussion with the sellers or their agent already, we're kind of just picking a date that works for us, right? Well, here's what you want to do. Make sure you're picking a date that at least gives your buyers enough time at a bare minimum to close the loan, right? Yeah. If we write a close date a month from now, what are the chances they're going to have their finances squared away by then? Not good. In a miracle, we can make it work, right? But if we don't need to do that, let's give ourselves at least a month and a half to 2 months. Allow them time in the contract, allow their lender time to get everything and all the paperwork squared away where they need it, right?
Especially being at the
Absolutely.
It takes more time.
Yeah. Conventional, I'll go a month and a half all day long. FHA, VA, I'm probably leaning more toward 2 months, right? Just to give that time. There are people that can get done sooner. But what starts to happen, Sean, especially during the busy time of years, there's a backlog on one particular point in the process. What do you think that is? The appraisals. All of a sudden, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get an appraisal, and you're just going nuts. And the appraisal is absolutely a necessary part to finish the underwriting process and get everything done. So if we don't get an appraisal until a week before closing, we're jumping through hoops, right? Yeah. And oh, by the way, what have you likely promised the sellers as a buyer's agent and the financing agent? We will provide you with a commitment letter, right? So you have to give yourself time for the commitment letter. I remember the first time, my first couple of deals, I didn't really know what that meant, and I was just picking a date and throwing it in there. I was picking like a week after the deal came together, And my lender came up to me nicely and she's like, hey, I really need you to give me more time for that commitment letter. Because I didn't realize what
Commitment letter, I don't know if
a commitment letter. On the financing addendum, it asks if the buyer will provide the seller with a commitment letter, basically saying, it's a letter from the lender that basically says, hey, we're good to go. We'll be ready to close on closing day. We're through underwriting, we've got the appraisal, everything's good. A commitment letter. And what we will do when we structure our financing addendums is we'll commit to getting a commitment letter to the sellers about a week prior to closing. And that does a lot of good for a lot of people, right? It makes sure the lender gets everything squared away and ready to go well before closing. So now, hey, if it's a week out, we're good to go. We shouldn't have anything that throws up the curveball, right? The lender has told everybody we're good, right? And it gives the sellers peace of mind, knowing that we are that committed to the transaction that we're going to have everything squared away at least prior to.
Okay.
Right?
I think
It's a little bit of an accountability measure.
I think with those deals I did, there was no commitment letter
That's
per se,
fine.
but it's probably verbalized.
Yeah, well, it's an option. You can choose. There's two options you can check on it, right? You can always check, hey, earnest money refunded to buyer, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
and or we're going to provide you with a commitment letter, this, that, and the other. And I prefer to go the commitment letter route. Makes the offer.
I got it. Okay.
Little break? No problem.
Yeah.
I'm gonna grab a cup of coffee.
All right, great.
If you're tuning in or watching from home, we're gonna take like a little 5-minute break. So if you have to use the restroom or grab some coffee yourself, please feel free to do so.
Thirty more seconds.
Okay. All right, let's keep it going. loan approval, we talked about that, giving them some time, making sure the lender has enough time to qualify as well. Closing date, make sure the closing date will work well for the buyer, their lender, and the title company. The title company will make it work for you. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are good days to close because they're middle of the week. Therefore, you have an extra business day before or after if you need to ship things. So I used to always shoot for Fridays, right? Hey, Friday, clients have the whole weekend to move in, that kind of thing. I stopped doing that for a couple of reasons. Number one, everybody picks Friday. So logistically for title companies, they're always running behind. People are showing up later. They just have issues, right? So then what we started doing were Wednesdays or Thursdays. And the other added benefit to that was exactly what this says. If for some reason something weird comes up and we have to push closing to the right a day, we can still close that same week. If it's a Friday and we're pushing it back a day, well, now we're going all the way to another week, right? Versus just one day. So that's something to consider as far as when you're picking a closing date. Home warranty, yeah, you can ask for one if you want to, or they can purchase one. Usually home warranties really don't become a topic of discussion unless based on the home inspection, you need to do some additional negotiating. Repair limits, usually not coming into any of that. Again, it's just going to be negotiated either at the time of, hey, we identified this, and this issue, you want it repaired by a licensed contractor prior to final walkthrough, or hey, these issues are identified, we estimate it's going to cost this much to fix them, we want to do an overall price reduction. So the buyers can take care of that afterward. Special clauses and contingencies. These are special conditions that must be met in order for the contract to close, such as satisfactory inspection report or the buyer obtaining funding. Carefully write any special clauses or contingencies your buyer would like to include in the offer. And then again, we talked about that cover letter earlier. So, contingencies are a home inspection contingency, sale of another property, purchase.
Oh, no, that's for the sale.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Truly most common ones. Another contingency is I don't think people sometimes view it as a contingency, but it's financing. The whole deal is contingent upon them getting financing. Right? So if they don't do that or they can't do that, well, then the deal's done. It was contingent upon that. Everybody agreed to that. Okay, page 17. Let's go over some great scripts. I got it. Yep.
They're really not that
Get a nice shot of my rear. Oh, well, hello there. I have to get one of those. It'll be a built-in handle right there.
Wait, nice.
Okay, when the buyer wants the seller to make repairs, and sometimes your buyers get a little crazy and irrational at this stage of the game, so we need to help them work through some stuff. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, until you have a physical inspection, we will not know how much these items will cost. We can find additional repairs we may want to negotiate. Consequently, you have three choices. You can offer the seller less money now to compensate for the buyer. 2, you can ask the seller now for a credit to repair these items using your own contractor. Or 3, I usually advise the clients wait for the physical inspection and negotiate all repair items at one time. How'd you like to move forward? Because when you're making your initial offer, it's really not the time to be negotiating onesies and twosies, right? We're looking at price, closing cost, close date, the big stuff, right? If we see something that's a glaring issue, well, we might factor that into the price that we're willing to offer, right? Or if it's other minor, smaller stuff, well, we'll just wait till it gets laid on the inspection and raise it at that time. Because what I'll do is I'll negotiate the crap out of the deal on the front end, and then if we have a lot of legitimate stuff pop up in the inspection, I'll renegotiate, right? If I start trying to negotiate everything all at one time, well, I've just given the sellers a lot more ammunition or a lot more bargaining chips than they originally have, right? I don't want those on the table when I initially negotiate. And I want to bring them up after the fact and say, hey, these are all safety concerns that need to be addressed, right? When the buyer wants to make a low offer, okay, because sometimes they want to make low offers when they're really kind of irrational or not legitimate, which is fine. But really, if you want to do them a service and save yourself some time, you might help them realize that, hey, we're not going to find you $300,000 property for $225. It's just not going to happen. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, there are 3 ways to negotiate a transaction. Number 1, you can make a low offer and run the risk of the seller rejecting it or countering back at full price. 2, you can make an offer closer to the asking price and be less flexible if there's a counter offer. Or 3, if you really want this home and are concerned that another buyer might purchase it, you can make a full price offer and give the seller what they want. It's your choice. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. Right? In a nutshell, that's kind of the 3 courses of action you have, right? Page 18, present the offer to the listing agent. Right? Call the listing agent immediately to let them know an offer is coming. That is crucial. If you are at a showing, you just finished it, and your clients say, hey Nick, hey Sean, we like the property, we want to make an offer. If you, so let's say that's what they tell you, and now they're gonna go home real quick, or they haven't had dinner yet, so they're gonna grab a bite to eat real fast. You're gonna go to the the office, prep all the paperwork, get it all signed, and submit it. How long might that take? A day.
An hour.
Yeah, it could take a day, depending on what time of day it is. It could take a few hours, right? Let's say best case scenario, it takes me at least 2 to 3 hours to do that, right? Yeah. But what could happen in that 2 to 3 hours?
Another offer.
Yeah, another offer could come in, or maybe there's already an offer in, and they can do what? They can fully execute that purchase agreement, right? But here's what I can do. If my client says, Zach, we want to write on this, right away, before we even start the paperwork and all that, I'm gonna call that agent immediately and say, hey, just so you know, I'm literally heading back to the office right now to put together an offer on this property. Because now what might that agent do? They might push the pause button on that other one to see what's gonna come in, right? So we get the door open for yourself, get your hand in the door. Say, hey, before you accept anything, I've got one coming your way. Give me 3 hours. I'll have it to you.
Do you ever say how?
I mean, if they have already shared with me the terms, absolutely. I say, hey, Zach, this is what we're offering. We're gonna go in at 250. Let's make it happen. I'll call the agent and say, hey, we got one coming in. They're talking about, a sale price of 250. I'll have an offer with all the details to you within a couple hours. Will you give me that time? Absolutely, at that price, we're willing to do that, right? So make that phone call, because nothing's worse than going to the office, you sign everything, you submit it, only to get the email. Oh, we literally just accepted one an hour ago. You know what I mean? So think about it that way. Request a reply within the shortest amount of time your market will allow. Okay, so that's kind of a two-tiered thought right there. Number one, I want to request a reply that they at least received my offer, right? I want official notification that they have received it. And number two, you might choose to also put in a deadline or say, hey, we want a response by this date and time, right? What we'll do is we'll submit the offer via email, so we have a record of it, and we'll also ask for confirmation they received it, but then we also follow it up with a phone call. Hey, so-and-so, this is Zach over at Keller Williams. Just want to let you know I literally just sent you an offer on 123 Main Street. Could you do me a favor once you've seen it? Would you email me and let me know that you got it? Right, not playing any games. Nobody's going to say they never got my offer, right? And I called you and told you to check your email for it, right? Now I even text them. Hey, and especially if I don't get on. Hey, just want to let you know I sent an offer your way on blah 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 blah. Please let me know you got it, right? Make sure they got that. And oh, by the way, what that allows you to do is if they're dragging their feet, because this is what can happen. It could be noon on Friday. They send it in. They see it right away, but they don't acknowledge it, right? And they want to drag things on. So they're going to say, hey, man, I was out of the office by noon on Friday. I don't check work and stuff again until Monday, so we didn't really receive it until then. Well, no, dude. I called you, told you that it was in your inbox, right? So don't play games with me, okay? Because they'll do that all day long. People will do that all day long to stretch things out and see what else they can get in the meantime. If the seller counters, consult with your buyer to either accept the counteroffer or recounter the offer. At this point, it's important to remind your buyer of current market conditions, right? When your buyer's offer is countered and your buyer wants to recounter, it's important to have the proper perspective. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, by countering the seller, by countering, the seller has essentially just sold you the home for $200,000. If you counter at $195,000, it allows the seller to walk away from you or accept another offer in the meantime. Is it worth the risk of selling? Basically, is it worth the risk? Okay, that's okay. That to me is a question that's kind of designed to pressure them a little bit to accept the counter offer. I'm just like, hey, here's the deal. This is the counter. How does that sit with you? Do you want to counter back? Just let me know. You need to take some time to think about it. That's cool. You have my number, right? Or oftentimes I ask you for a recommendation. So then I'll just give a recommendation. Hey, we started at 190. the counter back at list price 200 3%. Let's go back at 195 and 3%. See what we have to say. Right. Like by this point, like I know how the game is played. You know, but one of my favorite things to do is to predict what the counter offer is going to be, because when that happens, my buyer's like, wow, this dude knows what he's talking about. Like he knew exactly how they were going to respond, and now they've got a lot of trust in me. Okay, let's make that. Representing the seller, and sometimes I'll have clients say, okay, let's accept that, but I feel, based on my conversations, that I think we can do better. I say, well, tell you what. We'll say, well, let's just accept it. You know, 190, 200, 3%. Let's just accept it. 200. Well, hang on. Why don't we try 195 first?
What's the rush?
Right. Well, unless it's small. Well, why don't we try 195 first? And then guess what? If the sellers accept that, then what am I now in the eyes of my buyers? I just saved them $5,000, right? That's huge. Nobody I'm going to remind them of that, right? Representing the seller. When a buyer makes an offer on your client's property, there are 4 actions to take: receive the offer, and confirm receipt of it, gather information about the buyer, pre-approval, all that stuff. Present the offer to your client, then respond to it. Right? And it's been a long, long time since I've actually presented an offer to a seller in person. Right? Now it's mostly what I'll do is I'll kind of summarize the offer, send it to them and call them, and we'll talk through it and kind of go from there. Or I'll send them a copy of the whole thing as well. But very rarely will I actually go physically and meet them. It does have its benefits. So when I used to do it more often, I'd go meet them, we'd talk through it, and I would take a counter offer form with me, we'd sign it right then and there and send it back over. But now we just review it. A lot of countering actually takes place via email, so everybody comes to an agreement, and then we draft the counter offer and then we send it off. So, any questions on that? Receive the offer. First, thank the buyer's agent for the offer. If you know or even think there may be other offers coming in, tell the buyer agent at that time. It will create urgency. Then review the offer for accuracy and completeness, right? So even if I don't have another offer on the home yet, I'm not going to be bashful about telling them, hey, here's the deal. We got your offer. Great. Thank you very much. We're countering back at this, and we're going to be pretty firm at this counter because we've only been on the market for 2 days. We've got 7 showings scheduled, and our open house activity is off the charts. So if you want this property, you're going to have to come up with this counter. Because if you don't, we're going to continue to wait for a better one. Right? That's completely legitimate. You might not like that answer as a buyer's agent. Your buyers might not like that answer, but the sellers have every right to do that. Gather information. What's that?
Is this the time that you have the conversation, like the difference of $5,000 on a monthly payment?
Right. I would try to talk my lender to have that conversation instead of me, because I don't want to seem like the guy that's trying to talk me into it. But like going $5,000 more on a home. Next point is, what impact does it have on your monthly payment? $1 to $3 a month, maybe. You know what I mean? So I get it. It's $5,000 on the overall price. I get that. And $1 to $3 over a 30-year period is a lot of money. But if it's a home that you love and you absolutely want it, are you willing to pay an extra $1 to $3 a month to get the home? Right? I usually don't go down that route myself. I'll let the lender do it because sometimes it really turns people off because they feel like you're pressuring them to spend more money. Good question, though. But some people, other people, it's a flip side. Okay, when you put it that way, it's a no-brainer. Let's do it.
I mean, I've gawked at my own when I was looking at the townhouse a while ago. I was like, wow. Yeah. They want like $3,000 more. And for me, like $3,000 in my world is a trip around, wherever.
Right.
But my real estate agent essentially said it's like $2.
Right.
$3.
Right. A month on your
and it made sense. And then the situation was over. It was done. And
you got the home you wanted.
And we got the home.
You can always refinance later if you want to. Gathering information about the buyer. Aim to learn as much about the buyer and their motivation as possible. Ask the buyers questions such as how long have they been looking, are they pre-approved, do they have anything to sell, if they're from out of town, why are they moving to the area, why did they select a particular property, how they come up with their offer price, have they made offers on the properties, etc. Okay, so a lot of these questions, if I'm the buyer's agent and you ask them of me, I'm not going to tell you, right? Because if all of a sudden I'm the listing agent and I say, yeah, what brings the buyers to Minnesota? Well, job relocation. He starts this summer. What do I now know? You're about to be homeless. You need this property, so I'm gonna hold out on my price and make you pay top dollar for it, right? So don't reveal that stuff. But as a listing agent, ask those questions and find out the info. It's your job to uncover that stuff, right? Because if you find that out, you can help negotiate on behalf of your clients, right? But as a buyer's agent, it's kind of your job to keep, it's like we're playing poker. I can either show you my hand or I can keep it close, right? I don't want to show you my hand, so I'm not going to answer stupid questions. Or I'm going to give you non-answers. What brings them to the state of Minnesota? Oh, well, you know, just their particular situation hasn't moved in here. Yeah, the weather for sure, right? Why they settle on this home? Well, we've seen a lot of properties. There's a lot of great options out there, and they felt most comfortable moving on this one at this time. But they're still considered another great one to be. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, page 19. The more you know, at the very bottom of it, the more you know about the buyer, the better prepared you and your seller will be to respond, if necessary, to counter. The goal is to respond to the buyer with a high likelihood of knowing how that response will be taken, right? Because every once in a while, and I will have this conversation with buyers sometimes when they make an offer to sellers if they want to come in really low. I'll say, here's the deal: if you want the home and you're willing to pay closer to list price for it, let's start at a more reasonable price, because what you can potentially do is run the risk of offending them. If you come in super low right off the bat, they might not even choose to work or continue to negotiate with you because they feel insulted, right? And we don't want that to be the case if you really like the property. So we have to take that into consideration. This is where the art part of real estate really comes into play. You hear us all the time say real estate, it's an art and a science. A lot of the art is negotiating, because you're guessing, you're trying to read minds, you're making assumptions, you're not quite sure how this is going to be interpreted, or if you're going to make somebody angry, or if they're like, yes, I'll take that price all day long, right? So we have to have conversations and get a feel for particular transactions as we can. And a lot of that comes from picking up the phone and calling the other side of the deal. We don't do that anymore. Right? All we do is email. There are agents, we will call them about a transaction and they don't even answer. I call and they text right back. Like, dude, I know that means you just ignored the call. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm calling you because I need to talk something through with you. Now, or more importantly, I want to hear the tone of your voice when we have this conversation, because then I'll know what I really need to know. Right? So, representing the seller on page, go to page 20. Checklist for reviewing an offer. Okay, some of this is going to seem a little obvious, right? Make sure the address is correct. The price. Check to see whether the offer falls in line with the seller's expectations. Earnest money, what's the amount? Does it seem appropriate? Time for acceptance. Is there a deadline? Let's look at the pre-approval, okay? Let's look at the pre-approval and make sure it's a pre-approval, not a pre-qual. And here's what I would do. I would place a call into the lender. Say, hey, this is Zach at Keller Williams. I'm reviewing an offer that's submitted by a couple of people that you have a pre-approval for. So I'll ask you a couple of questions about it. Have they been through the pre-approval process? Have you verified a bunch of the information already? And in your assessment, are they strong buyers? If we move forward with these folks, do you anticipate we'll have a smooth transaction and we'll close? And if I sense any hesitation, red flag, right? But if I get a lender on the phone and says, oh yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they've been in, they have all the forms already, I've verified their income, they're good, very, very solid, very strong buyers, I don't anticipate any issues. Well, great. Now I feel pretty good about it, right? So make that phone call. Loan approval. Be sure to have a specific, Sean, this is what we talked about earlier. Be sure to have a specific date for formal and final loan approval. That's in the form of that commitment letter sometimes, right? We want to know at least a week out. Financing terms, what sort of terms used? Was that kind of financing, VA, FHA, conventional, USDA? What are we looking at? Do they have any county down payment assistance programs you're utilizing? I'm going to know about that and decide and know how it's going to impact the transaction. Closing date, you've got it. Home warranty, you've got it. Conveyances, repairs, we've already talked about. Special clauses are contingent. Okay, this is a huge one. Let's talk about this for a minute. If a home is sold, what does that mean?
is and accept it out.
So we've had discussion. Let me ask you, to the general public, what does the word sold mean?
Now that
Yes? To the general public, the word sold often means in their mind, hey, that property's done. It's sold. It's the ownership has been transferred, right? That's sold. Okay. So explain to me what sold versus closed means. Because are they the same thing? Not really. Not in realtor speak. Sold and closed are two very different things. Right? A property can be sold and then closed upon, right? But what does it mean and what's the important distinction between the two? Closed is transfer of title. Right. And John, you said before that sold means it's an accepted agreement, right? So a property is sold when we get a fully executed purchase agreement on that property, because it then moves into what status? Into a pending status, right? Like, and this is why it's confusing, because the MLS, once it sells, calls it sold. When they should call it closed, right? It's sold. The seller has agreed to sell it to a buyer. It has been sold. It is now spoken for. Now it's just waiting to actually be closed upon. So now that the buyer technically officially owns it, the sellers receive their money, right? But when we look at sold versus closed, and we understand that the general public gets the two kind of confused sometimes, well, that's when we get into a conversation surrounding contingencies, right? Because we have a contingency out there right now called what? When somebody's trying to also sell their property.
sorry, repeat that.
I'll just give it to you. Contingent upon the sale of another home, or contingent upon the sale of another property, right? So it became a huge issue in the previous purchase agreement before the most recent update last August. All it asked was, does the buyer need to sell another home in order to move forward on this one? And people were checking the no box all day long. They say, no, we don't have to sell a property. It's already sold. It's already under contract. Yeah, but what do you think they were really asking? Does it have to close? Do the buyers need to close on a property in order to qualify? Because that's usually the case, right? Usually most buyers will need to close on a current property that they own in order to qualify and purchase the next one, right? It's just most people's situations. So that's why you see that big change in the PA where now you have a couple of options. It says, number one, do they need to sell a property? Yes or no? Okay, great. If they don't need to sell a property, do they need to close on a property? Yes or no? Because if I need to sell a property still, well, that means I might still have to get it on the market. I've got to find a buyer. I've got to get it under contract, and now it's sold. Still got to get it closed. If I just have to get it closed, that means, hey, I already found the buyer. The deal has come together. I just needed to actually officially close. And with this kind of information, you as the listing agent can start asking a bunch of questions now. If I get one where it says, hey, we still need to sell a property, I'm going to say, great, is it on the market yet? When's it going on the market? What's the price going to be? How quickly do you think it's going to sell? Right? If it's closed or just needs to close but not sold, I'm going to say, great, will you send me a copy of the purchase agreement? Has it been through inspection? Has it been through appraisal? What's the close date? Right? I'm going to start asking questions about these other deals before I let my sellers just accept that offer, right? Because I want to make sure we're getting into some solid deals that aren't necessarily going to jeopardize this one, especially if there's other offers on the table up for consideration. Any questions about this? Any thoughts? Any feedback on that? It gets really sticky.
I have a client that's up in Fargo. Their family's moving down here. They just accepted an offer on their house that they need to sell.
Okay, good. You were telling me about this earlier, that they didn't get it sold. You didn't have it sold.
Yes, same people. So when they come down here in a couple weeks and start shopping for homes, would it be an obligation? I guess, would I then be calling their agent?
I absolutely had a conversation.
And then also the buyer's agent on that side of the transaction also to see if those VA buyers, it's VA financing, I know, if they're actually, if they're good, strong, and they can move through with that person.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Have you ever done that?
I've called and talked to the listing agent or I've had listing.
But both sides of that
I would probably just talk to the listing agent,
Okay.
but you know, knock yourself out if you wanna talk to.
because
both.
he can. I mean, and he should be doing that too.
Right,
You
but
know,
here's,
talking to the buyer.
yeah, because here's, what do you think the buyer's agent's gonna tell you?
Of course, all buyers.
Yeah. They're good buyers, they're good to go, no problems at all.
So that's his
you're gonna-
job.
Yeah, if you're gonna get an accurate candid assessment, who's it likely gonna be from?
It's that other agent.
Likely the
Because
listing
he is
agent.
Keller Williams agent.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Well, that too, but
And so it's his job to really verify with those buyers, lender, basically.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, we call them, have some conversations, and verify that information. And, you know, you take that for what it's worth.
Then,
now-
so let's say that we did find a property down here in a few weeks, put in a purchase agreement. That purchase would be contingent upon this, of course, the sale of their property.
It's already sold.
The close. See, there's not a contingency for close, is it?
There's a box now that asks, it's not a contingency, it's just asking, is it subject to?
Okay.
Is it subject to then closing on another property?
How does that work then? Because they won't be closing until like middle of May. And they gotta find a house down here before then.
That's my favorite kind of client. It means they gotta find one fast.
Okay.
And motivate.
But
Or
they
they
can't,
just, or they
but
just
they
push the
can't
close
close
date.
on this new house though before.
You have to ask their lender. But some people can. Some people don't need to sell a home in order to buy a new one, depending on the price.
Isn't the pre-approval letter
It should,
state,
subject
with no
to,
other contingency?
yeah, or say subject to the sale of current
And I
residence.
suppose, you could clarify the possession date of the property as well.
Absolutely.
Like maybe make it a week after they close so that they have time to move into their
Right.
new place down here,
Absolutely.
because they're not homeless.
Yeah, absolutely. Or they move down here, they remotely close that one because they pre-signed,
I see.
and then they close on this one down here the same day and move right in.
Okay.
Was it yesterday or a couple days ago? Remember how we talked about one of the most, some of the most challenging part of our job is the logistical aspect of it. That's the hard part. Finding clients and getting clients is not easy, but it's doable. Getting closings through, getting transactions through to a successful closing, that's where we make our money. And that's all behind the scenes. People really don't see us do
Those
it.
are turning up here.
Yeah.
Man, Jesus.
We, so our newest administrative person on our team, she's a former client of ours, and she used to work with Carly. And a few years ago, I helped them sell and buy a property. And then a couple years after that, she joined our team. And she said, my God, she said, I did not realize how much stuff goes on behind the scenes when you guys are doing this. She's like, it's unreal to me. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of times things can get kind of heated, or there's a critical moment that's going on and a critical issue that we solve and work through that they don't even ever know about. The last thing I want is them being stressed or freaked out over something that there's no sense in them worrying about yet until we know that we can notify them about it. So, but yeah. There's also a contingency of, hey, we're going to accept this offer contingent upon the sellers finding the property that they want to buy, right? In which case you're kind of agreeing to an arbitrary or flexible close date, allowing the sellers enough time to find the property. Right? We're in the kind of market right now that sellers can get that because their properties are in such high demand right now. The buyers will say, hey, we want to buy your property, and we don't care how long we have to wait for you to find the next one available. 21, page 21, number 3, present the offer to your client. You have received an offer from the buyer's agent and have reviewed this offer to make sure there are no questions or surprises. Now it's time to present it to your client. Call them, let them know you have an offer, inform them of the offer price and close date. I don't think I've never, I think I already talked about, doing it in person versus not in person. If possible, present the offer to your client in person. If possible, if not, how do you go? Bring your laptop or tablet with you if you want to review it online. Otherwise, print out a copy. Keep the tone of the conversation as positive as possible at all times. Never criticize the buyer or agent for their offer. Sometimes it's tough to deliver an offer to sellers that's 20 or 30 grand under what it's listed at, right? So you have to keep that in mind. Reach a decision. Reach a point of positive agreement with your client on how they will proceed. Explain they have 3 choices. accept the offer. If it's reasonable, then they accept the offer on the spot, remind the seller that they accept the offer, the property is sold at that point. Counter the offer, consult with your client to determine a reasonable counter offer amount, write the counter offer amount contract, or prepare a counter offer form and have the seller initial it, or reject the offer. If it's unreasonable, the seller may reject it, the seller may or may not decide to invite the buyer to submit the offer. Your goal is to get your seller focused on a response, not whether the offer is good or bad, or whether the buyer is realistic, right? Because here's the deal, if somebody submits you a crappy offer, you don't have to reject it. What's the harm in just saying we counter back at this price? But it's the same. It's a nicer way of rejecting it. It's basically the same thing. No, we want this price. But at least you're keeping the conversation alive. Maybe because some people feel like they just need to test the water. They might really want that home and say, well, let's come in 20 grand under, see what happens. And because then we'll know at least we did that, right? If they come back and say no, full price, okay, full price, whatever it takes. But we just need to know that we at least asked. If there was the opportunity, we would have got that, right?
Have you ever been in a situation where you presented an offer, or vice versa, somebody presented an offer to you? Well, you wouldn't, of course. They counter back. No, we want more than list price now.
Disconnected because the live streaming Mel called and she said all we're seeing is the screen or something.
It happens for a minute or so, comes back.
Have you seen that? Has it been happening?
No.
Or you just know that from watching?
I just know that.
Okay.
So she started getting that recording. So.
Okay. Well, if they continue to have, it says I have 2 viewers. If they continue to have an issue, let me know. Maybe I can try to stop and restart it. It's always goofy. You have no idea who's watching. You gotta be careful what I say.
So let's say that offer was real low though, and
Yeah.
then sellers just have to be, kind of jerks about it and say, no, we're gonna counter back at 5,000 more than list price now.
Right.
Have you ever had that or seen it?
Well, I've heard of it, and that's a sticky situation, Sean, because when somebody offers their home for sale on the MLS for a certain price, what they're telling people is they'll take that price for the home. You know what I mean? Otherwise, that's false advertising,
Right, okay.
right?
Yeah.
So there's really kind of no repercussions to that other than it's very highly frowned upon, but they certainly could do that. Or there could be a good reason for that too, though, as part of negotiations. Hey, we'll do this for you, but you're gonna have to pay $5 grand more. There's all kinds of stuff. You have something there?
Oh, when you said that when you put the house on the market for whatever price, that the price that we take at it. Thought there was some story about somebody that just was testing the water, got the offer, and then just got cold feet.
Say that again.
They had gotten a full price offer.
Mhm.
They were just
Oh
testing
yeah,
the
that
water,
could be it too.
and
well,
then decided not to.
Yeah, so that could be tricky. Somebody gives you a full price off and they decide, well, what we're selling. It could be all kinds of reasons.
Or like, oh, we're selling way too cheap.
That could be too. Or death in the family, job transfer, job loss, something like that.
Sorry to get us off track.
No,
here.
what I like more than anything during the night are the questions, because I feel like that's where we do a lot of our learning. So let's talk about presenting the offer on page 22. Present the initial offer to you. So, hey, good morning. It's Zach over at Keller Williams. We have an offer here for your review. Usually I try to be a little more excited. Hey, this is Zach. I've got some great news. We got an offer on your home, right? I've got to try to get them pumped up a little bit. We have an offer here for you to review. I'm going to go through the offer with you. Is now a good time? Offer came in at $200,000. They're putting $6 grand down in earnest money. They're asking for 3% closing costs. They put 5% down. They want to close in April on the 15th, and they're asking for 1% of credit. All right. Just a quick high-level summary. And sometimes, too, what I'll do in this initial conversation is I'll say the projected net to you is this, right? Because when I hear all these numbers and percentages and all that, they honestly, they don't care about this. So what's the net to me? What am I going to walk away with, Zach? That's what I want to know more than anything. Because, the offer might be $275 and 3% this with this and blah, 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 but you're going to walk away with $250,000. Okay, let's jump to that point, right? Because I'm okay with that number. I don't care, because a lot of times they don't care how it's structured. They just want to know what they're going to net. And I'll tell that when we counter buyer's agents, a lot of times I'll say, here's the deal. I'm not giving you a specific counter offer other than you can structure the deal in a way that nets us $260. Do whatever you want with your closing costs and price, I don't care. Net us $260 and you have yourself a deal. It's about the net, right? The actual sale price and closing costs, that's all arbitrary. That can be whatever it needs to be to get the job done if it gets my clients the net that they want, so long as we're not risking huge appraisal issues, right? That's what it's all about. Because we can structure it in a way that the sale price is $275, then we can structure it in a way that the sale price is $270, but in both ways, it still nets them the same, right? So in those instances, those prices, that's really arbitrary. It does not matter. What's the net to my seller going to be? That's what I'm countering you on. Okay, that's the initial offer. Present a low offer to your seller. Never criticize or show a negative attitude about a low offer. And here's why. Because they might be thrilled with that offer, but if you poo-poo the offer right away, well, guess how they're going to think about it now, right? You just may have shot yourself in the foot on getting that deal done, right? Okay, we're priced at $250. Hey, I know this one came in at $240. I know it's 10 grand low. I don't know what they're thinking either. Well, what do you think they're going to do now? Versus they may have thought before you said any of that, oh, $240, wow, that's great, we'll take it, right? So now that's lower than our asking price, but it is an offer, so we need to decide what you'd like to do, whether it's counter, accept, or whatnot. Recommend that your client accept the offer. I urge you to consider this offer very carefully. Consider the value of meeting your moving goals in the long run, meeting your overall goal of selling your home is a more critical need, right? And Nick, that kind of gets back to the situation you gave earlier for the buyer. Hey, consider the overall long-term, process here. $5,000 more for the property, $5 extra a month on your mortgage payment. Is that worth it to you in the long term, just to get the home that you like where you like it, right? Because some people might say, absolutely, let's just get the deal done. Your property's been on the market now for 90 days, and the average time on market for this area at this price point is only 30. Buyers are going to look at this. They're going to look at the same data. They're going to see that your neighborhood's house sold for only the home is in your neighborhood sold for only $250, and the house around the corner sold for that, but yours is priced higher. They're going to want to pay fair market value compared to these other sales, right? If you accept the offer, your probability of closing and meeting your goal is 100%, and you want to meet your goal, right? And you can take that and tweak it a little bit and change it here and there. A lot of times I'll just help people keep it in perspective. Hey, here's the deal. It's a pretty solid offer. It's going to net you this amount. It's going to be able to allow you to move on, cut ties with this one, keep doing what it is you want to do. Is that something that would be okay with you? Or would that be helpful? Is that going to help you get to where you want to go? Kind of frame it that way. So recommend that your client make a counter offer. Page 23. We look at any offer as a positive thing, at least initially. We always recommend a counter offer instead of rejecting the offer. I think that's a pretty good principle, right? As I said before, even if your counter offer is list price, right? It may be that we can negotiate this up to where we need it to be. Let's put together a solid counter offer. We need to get it back to them quickly to keep things rolling and see if we can make the offer work. I think the thing to focus on here is the price you want to get for your house. Putting this offer aside, if you could get this home sold and closed in 30 days, what would you feel comfortable selling for? Let's put together a counter offer that would put us in range where you feel comfortable. Remember, not all offers are going to work, but it is a good sign that we're getting an offer. We made this person's list as a house that they thought was a good one, or a best homes for their money. I can call the other agent and ask them if they're willing to come up on price. Okay, that's a good script, but it's overthinking, right? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's the offer. Would you like to counter? Yeah. What would you like to counter at? Or, oh, I'm not sure, Zach. Well, here's my recommendation. Let's counter back at this. How do you feel about that? That's great. That used to be more wishy-washy because I think people feel pressured, like I was telling them what to do. But what I realized is they were waiting for me to tell them what to do. They're like, Zach, we don't know what to counter back at. What should we counter? Okay, great. This is my recommendation. Try countering back at this. Let's see what happens. Right. Number 4, respond to the offer. Once you and your client have made a decision on how to proceed based on the offer you received, you need to respond to the buyer's agent. Notify the buyer's agent of your seller's decision. If you're presenting a counter offer, prepare the document and then send it over to them. If the buyer accepts the counter offer, have the buyer's agent obtain their client's signature and have them sign off on it. Once both parties have signed the contract, retrieved it, and the earnest money check, all that fun stuff, then you're kind of good to go. The buyer agent may deliver the earnest money check to the closing company or the listing brokerage to put in an escrow account, and that really begins the process of what at that point? We have a fully executed PA, so now what are we going to launch into? Home inspection. Home inspection, yep. Presenting a counter offer to the buyer's agent. Hey, good afternoon, John. This is Zach over at Keller Williams. Thank you so much for your offer. We greatly appreciate it. It was a little bit lower than what the seller had hoped. And then shut up and see what they say. Because a lot of times when a buyer's agent submits a crappy offer, do you think they know they're submitting a crappy offer? Yeah, so sometimes it's like, oh God, I know, I couldn't get him up anymore. Okay, perfect, great, let's work on them together. Right? Yeah. The sellers have come back with a reasonable counter offer that should work. You counter them back at this, the rest of your terms are fine except for maybe this one. Is this something that'll work for your folks? Your buyers get a great home in this market. It's very, very competitive right now, so if they can lock this one up now, it's probably going to be beneficial for them. And I always say things like, hey, if we can get this wrapped up today, get it moving. Right? I try to entice them into like, how can we figure out a way to bring it together right now? Because some people, like, they want that deal, like the whole commission check, right? Like, hey man, I'll tell them, if you can get your clients to accept these terms, let me know. I can have everything signed and drafted over to you within minutes. Right? Because they're thinking, like, ooh, we can have a deal here, right? So I'll dangle that here. Okay, so let's go to page 26. Check the time real quick. So just a few minutes left. Set the stage for positive negotiation. All right, I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of jerks out there. There are a lot of arrogant, pompous agents out there who think they know everything there is to know about this. And I say that half joking, right? I'm being half facetious, but I've also dealt with a fair amount of agents that, especially when you're a younger dude like myself, until they look up my stats on MLS, they don't realize that I do the kind of business that I do, so they think they can just pull stuff over on me, or they don't know what's going on. I've had plenty of conversations with agents, brokers, and go toe-to-toe with them all day long, because I know the contracts, right? I'm not being cocky, but I know the contracts. I know the language, I know the verbiage, and I structure it that way specifically. I had a broker just a few weeks ago. We had this really goofy situation on a listing of ours, and Carly was running up against some brick walls with this person, and the broker reached out to me because we co-list, and he said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about this. And he at first tried the sweet talking thing. I said, okay, sounds good. Get to the point. And we got to a point where I said, well, no, this is a box that's checked, and this is why that's significant. This is what I loved. I wish I had recorded it. Their broker literally said to me on the phone, it doesn't matter what box is checked. I'm like, dude, and it says to him, that's the whole point of purchase agreements. Like, are you listening to yourself right now? Of course that's what matters. That's why we have these contracts, and that's why we have the different boxes and options to check. It's absolutely critical. So right then and there, I knew it was just becoming an emotional thing. They were mad at how the situation had played out, because they had a brand new agent who I don't think necessarily explained something right to her clients, and now they're trying to backpedal. I'm like, you guys are locked into a contract. There's no backpedaling anymore. You know, I'll be nice and professional about it, but no, this is a done deal. We're moving forward, right? So know the contracts, and but I'm going to circle back to it talks about setting the stage for positive negotiations. You don't want to go there immediately, right? Like, you want to be as nice and professional as possible, even if it's kind of a contentious negotiation, because you can do that professionally. You can absolutely do that professionally. If it's a low offer, or even if your clients are being a little crazy or irrational, you can still deliver that news in a very professional manner. People are going to throw in little things here and there, little digs, you know, blah, blah, blah. Just let it fall off your shoulders. You can't even think twice about it. I have to do this every day, right? Especially my position right now, which is more of a management. It has to just roll off your shoulders, because sometimes people blow up and they lose it, and they don't know the whole story, and nor do you know what's going on in their life or their day that day, right? So just let it wash right over and stick to negotiating. And remember, at the end of the day, it's always your client's best interest that's at heart, not your ego, and not, you know, winning, pulling something over on somebody, or being the winning. It's about doing what's best for your client, which can be difficult sometimes. Whether you represent the buyer or the seller, the goal is the same: to kick off the negotiation process that's positive, efficient, and ultimately leads to a win-win, right? Accepting the offer. Ideally, if the listing agent and the offer price is right, the seller will accept it, the buyer's initial offer, and move directly into a contract to close process. Okay? If they reject it, it's also possible the seller immediately rejects the initial offer. Perhaps they receive it and decided to accept a more attractive offer, they just didn't like the price, etc. In this case, the buyer agent should press forward to see if no really means no, or if it just means no. However, the most common response is to initially offer a little bit lower, and then the seller will make a counteroffer. This is a sign that the seller is interested in the buyer's offer and has extended an invitation to negotiate. I just simply call this starting a conversation. We're starting the conversation, people. We don't know where it's going to take us. We don't know if it's going to lead to a successful agreement or not. But we're never going to know unless we start that conversation. While you cannot control or predict the actions or decisions of the client, Lord knows that's the truth, or the agent, ditto on that, on either side of the deal, you do have complete control over what you say and do in an effort to influence a positive negotiation process. Hey, I don't have control over the other agent or their crazy client. I don't even have control over my crazy client. Right? So you just have to do and focus on what you can control and try to help guide people to successful transaction, right? Which is tough sometimes. It really is. That's why we get paid the big bucks. Customer experience focus. Recognizing that customers come first is among Keller Williams Realty's 9 core beliefs. Belief system that guides the way that we treat each other and our customers, right? And here's the deal. It's not just a Keller Williams thing, right? That should be like an individual personal thing with you and your personal businesses, right? It's a customer service, customer experience that need to repeat. So we're going to wrap it up at this point. What I'd like to do is get any additional questions and feedback from you guys regarding today's content. Keep up on the Daily 10-4. That goes for you guys as well who are watching. The Daily 10-4 is absolutely crucial, critical. 10 contacts added to the database, 10 new contacts, 10 notes or emails to people, and then 10 previews or showings of homes if you have the time to do those. I cannot stress to you how much making those contacts are going to continue to drive business and build momentum for you. Anything from you fellas? Today helpful?
Very.
Okay, it's kind of like when people are like, oh, you know, making and receiving offers, that sounds boring. Not really. That's like the in-depth detailed stuff you really want to know, because there's so many different ways you can approach it, so many situations. So
That's what it really comes down to.
absolutely. Well, fellas, if nothing from you, I think there might be some food out in the lunchroom. So thanks for coming.
I thought we were going till 12.
9 to 11 today. I mean, I can go another hour. if you want.
No.
Oh, I see how it is. I see how it is. That's okay all of a sudden.
All right.